You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
What's up, folks? It's No-Gi Thursday. Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, soon to have its national convention on September 19th and 20th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, along with my co-host and vice chair, Mr. Michael Liebowitz, who's also helming this amazing station that we call The Rational Alternative. Michael, tell me what's going on The Rational Alternative.
Well, first of all, let me tell you, I'm fired up about this convention. Can't wait. Can't wait to go. Can't wait to spend time with you, with Carlos, with the team. It appears Subby may be coming. I hope he does. That'd be great.
The boys are back in town, baby.
Yeah, so I'm fired up about that. As far as this channel, look, we got everything going on. We got this show daily, Monday through Friday, noon Eastern time, 9 Pacific, where we talk about the news of the day from a pro-capitalist perspective. Plus, we have some fun. I've got the weekend show. I've got the weekend members only show. And we've got some other stuff coming down the pike. Also, either later on today or tomorrow, depending on how my time is situated, because I'm interviewing Jim Valiant today. We're going to have a discussion about words. So that'll either be out tonight or maybe tomorrow. We have to wait and see. But either way, a lot going on. We're up to 969 subscribers. I really want to blow this channel up. I want to, we need to be the go-to spot. Because here's the thing. The one thing you will never, ever get on this channel, Mark, is bullshit. Right?
That's true, baby.
It's not to say we can never be wrong. We could be wrong. But if we are, we'll admit
mostly
it.
You.
For one.
Mostly you.
Me. See, that you just contradicted me because I'm saying there was no bullshit, and then you bring the bullshit. But either way, we're loving life. We're loving this show. We're loving ideas, and we love super chats and super stickers. So if the mood moves you, we'd appreciate it.
It makes Michael smile. Yeah, man, this is a channel that's focused on life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. We unashamedly hold those values as the ideal values for every individual, and we want to try to bring those ideas to the forefront of this country so that you and I and everybody in it can be free to choose. Oh God, what a strange concept that is now, Michael, in the 21st century America, free to choose. It sort of segues into our first concept here, if you want to start talking about the presumption of liberty. I loved that article, by the way.
I did too, but I want to talk about something else first.
I threw that out there because I had a feeling you were going to want to switch up the structure.
Well, it's not even in the talk here, but it's what I call the pseudo tough guy, and I just posted to X.
Oh yeah. God, by the way, guys, we talked about this before. Should I tell my story as well, or just talk?
You can tell it. You can tell it, but can you let me flow first?
Flow.
You don't just jump in.
Flow,
you gotta
baby.
Wait. You gotta
Flow,
wait,
baby.
You know what I found out doing a little research, Mark, that I found very interesting. So I was doing comparisons between podcasts like this one that are done remotely, where you have the split screen, or podcasts done in a studio where people are talking. So what it said was that interruptions are far more natural and lead to a far more natural flow of discussion when it's in studio. But when it's in this format, the interruptions just come off as rude.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting thing.
You're just trying to give me a rationalization for not ever interrupting you.
No, you can interrupt me, but I mean, I'm going to call you out on it. So I come across Andrew Wilson, the famous dickhead, blocked me, by the way. So
yeah, I saw that, the paleo conservative jagoff.
Yeah. So he and I had a debate in the past, and he was just a wicked dick, and I quit. I said, screw this. But anyways, he had suggested that he had a recent idiotic debate with Candace Owens, and he suggested that how AIs were assessing it. And I said, how about you do this? Why don't you submit the debate we had to AI? right? So he didn't respond, but one of his minions did that I thought might be him. I wasn't, I couldn't really tell. So finally, I just DM'd Andrew and I said, hey, is this dude representing you? Like what's going on? So I told him, hey, why don't you and I finish our debate? And why? And I said, well, look, I said, you misrepresented me. You were very rude. I said, why don't we have a debate by standard rules? And he's like, this is unimportant. I've got important things to do. I said, well, if you have any integrity at all, you'd want to set the record straight, wouldn't you? And he says, if you say one more word, I'm blocking you. And I said, dude, I don't give a fuck if you block me. Like, okay, you block me. And so he blocked me. Clint Russell, another one of these guys, he blocked me too, because every time he puts out one of his ridiculous claims, I said, Clint, what's the evidence for this claim? So then Clint told me, you're a federal agent, whatever. He blocked me, then he unblocked me, and then he blocked me again. Then, of course, there's Dave Smith. He once blocked me. Now he's unblocked me. But Andrew, when he's talking to people, he insults them. He shouts them down. Dave Smith is very fond of on the internet telling people they're bitches. Yeah, whatever you say, bitch, and things of that nature. I've met Dave Smith. You know what I mean? He's 60 pounds soaking wet, right?
Yeah, he's a very slight dude.
Right. And that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be tough. I don't care if people are tough. I don't care if they can fight. Fighting, in many respects, I think is idiotic. Right. But when you're going to run around calling people bitch all the time, it's the pseudo tough guy that I'm talking about. These guys, we've heard of toxic masculinity. I think it's pseudo masculinity would be a more apt term.
That's what those toxically masculine guys are. They're not really masculine.
Right. It's like they put on this big show. Like, you're on the internet, dude, running around calling people bitch. So, I said today in a post, I said, these are the first guys. If anybody ever actually confronted them in person, they'd be on the phone to the police in 2 seconds flat. I know. There's no doubt in my mind about that. None. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with if somebody threatens you calling the police. You should call the police, right? But don't be a dick to people. This other guy who's, the misfit patriot, who I'm no fan of, but he actually said to Dave online, he said, if we ever meet in person, please talk to me the way that you're talking to me now. Please talk to me that way.
He won't.
Of course he won't.
I've said the same thing to people.
But the thing is why antagonize people? Why be a jerk? You're not going to throw a rock in a riot, right? Just be decent to people. You don't have to be a jerk. I'm reminded of, there was this big white guy, Big Mike, we used to call him in prison. And this other guy, they were playing basketball, and the guy kept antagonizing him, bumping into him, whatever, calling him names, that sort of thing. And then Mike finally told him, dude, when we go inside, I'm going to break your ribs. And then the guy says to Mike, oh no, I'm a Christian. I don't engage in violence. And then Mike told him, then why do you keep screwing with me? Right? Leave me alone. And again, it's not to advocate violence. It's to advocate civility.
Amen.
Because here's the thing. I hold to a nonviolent lifestyle, right? I don't think that words, I'm not going to say under any circumstances, but under virtually any circumstances, I don't think words should lead to violence. They're just words, right? But I understand that everybody doesn't share my philosophy. So I'm not going to go around antagonizing people, calling people names, calling them bitch. And then when one of them tells me, yeah, I'm going to break your face, I'm going to say, oh, no, I'm a man of peace. But anyway, that's just my rant because I was.
No, Michael, they say an armed society is a polite society for the simple reason that, if you don't mind your P's and Q's, somebody might pull out a weapon and do something to you, right? That was sort of the idea of the Old West. And I feel like the same. Look, I remember once I was helming a class, and two guys were doing an exercise, and we have hard rules in class. You can't get physical with somebody. You can't, because physicality in acting is a very controlled phenomenon, right? It's all choreographed out. Otherwise, when you're in the throes of emotion, you're going to hurt somebody. And even when it's fully controlled, you can hurt people by accident, right? And so there was this big athletic dude who was like a former college football player and a wrestler, and he was a friend of mine. He was a tough guy for real and super athletic. And this little dude, and they were in the exercise, and the little dude was just saying, "Fuck you, motherfucker! I'll kick your ass!" And he's just screaming this stuff into this guy's face. And the guy he's like, you could crack an egg on his head and it would boil on his head. He was so mad, but he knew that he had the restriction of the class, which was you can't hit anybody, you can't grab them, you can't do any of that stuff. Mostly those were put there, Michael, because I did that in class. I did it once in class, and it didn't bode well.
There's always one.
Well, that's one of the reasons why the rules got enforced. Anyway, right in the middle of the exercise, Michael, I said, "All right, Darren, you can do what you need to do. I see you're mad. Go ahead and do what you would do in life to the guy." You saw this little dude shrink and curl up into himself when the real possibility of violence was actually right there in front of him. Suddenly his behavior got, I'll say it, truthful. The other stuff was untruthful. So I did, he didn't do anything. Darren didn't. I stopped it immediately. I just wanted to see the guy's reaction, Michael, because he was behaving so untruthfully in a way that he was behaving in a way that the internet bullies behave because they know there's no repercussions to their fucking behavior. And Michael, I'm not necessarily proud of this, but there are times when I've been called out by these guys, and I've said, "Look, I'll fly to your hometown. I'll put on the gloves. We'll get in a ring in a mixed martial arts place, and let's just do it. Tell me where you live, sign a waiver. We'll do it." And automatically what happens? I get blocked or they just run away. Almost not 100% of the time, not almost 100% of the time that happens.
Right. And the thing is, again, let's just be civil. And I mentioned the big names because they're the big names. Right. But this is not like it's limited to them. This is all over the internet where people do this. And it's just, come on.
Yeah. I mean, and Andrew is toxically masculine, Michael. I mean, he's like in the Andrew Tate world of like manhood where, I mean, Andrew Tate can back up. He can back up what he says, but it's like, but they emulate that and they don't know how to do that stuff. Right. And so they become caricatures of men, like toxic caricatures of men. Who in the world wants to be like Andrew Tate except a freaking incel? Or not Andrew Tate. Andrew Wilson. Who wants to be like that guy except an incel? A guy who doesn't know what it's like to be a man. Because he is. I saw that debate between you and him, and it was disgusting. The things he was saying to you were despicable. It was gross. You were great, by the way. I thought you handled his hypotheticals and his horrible debate style really well, but it was ugly.
Yeah. So anyway, that was what was on my mind. Coming on the air.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I want to tell you a quick story. Can I tell you a quick story what happened to me last night? And then we'll get to the news. I promise, folks. So last night I had to get up to go to the bathroom. I don't know, 11:30, maybe it was 1 o'clock. I don't know. So I put on my slippers and I'm walking upstairs, and it feels like there's you ever have like a pebble in your shoe?
Yeah.
And you got to get it out. So I feel this in my shoe, in my slipper. So I pull it out and I'm like, what the hell is this? It felt like, you ever see like a staple stuck through something?
Yeah.
Like a piece of gum. That's what it felt like a staple stuck through a piece of gum. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, it was real hard, like a staple. And I'm thinking, well, Diana, she eats a lot of those, what do you call them? Tootsie Pops. So I'm thinking a piece of the Tootsie Pop maybe fell or whatever. You know what I mean? So I get up and I get to the bathroom and I turn the light on, and in my hands was the most alien looking bug I've ever seen.
Did it bite you?
It was dead, thank God. But this thing was big and mean looking. And you should have saved it. You should have saved it. And
you put it on here, and then somebody could have identified it for you, like Megan.
Well, I got it in the trash. I mean, I could go get it.
Jesus. I don't know. There's a lot of bad things over there on the East Coast, including a lot of democratic socialists, folks. Let's talk about the presumption of liberty, man.
The presumption of liberty. Take it away, brother.
No, I love this. I love this article because it puts something in terms that I hadn't really thought about before, Michael, where the presumption of liberty is the same thing as the presumption of innocence, right? It's akin to that. In other words, to take somebody's liberty, you have the onus of proof on you. You don't just presume that the government has the right to take away your liberty for the common good. They have to make a case for themselves in order to do it. And or you have to be doing something egregiously awful in order to have your liberties constrained. And we come from a society right now, Michael, where that's no longer a primary concept. The presumption of innocence isn't a concept anymore. Now we have a permission-only society. We're quickly slipping into a permission-only society, where the presumption is that you have to prove why the government should not do this thing, as opposed to them proving why they should. Right. What do you think of this, Michael? I love this presumption of innocence concept.
So, first of all, I'm guilty of the type of language that they refer in. Like I've said before, people should be allowed to do, X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
But it really is the wrong way to do it, to explain it, right? There should be they're in a position to allow you to do anything. If they're going to make an argument to infringe upon your liberty, they better have the good argument.
Correct.
For us to allow them to do that as the government, right? So the first time I ever came across this concept, the Presumption of Liberty, was in Randy Barnett's book, Restoring the Lost Constitution. And in back of his method of constitutional interpretation, he said there should be a presumption of liberty. And so basically the people who are arguing for government encroachment have to prove it. Now, he was an originalist. He is. I don't know if he still is, but I think he is, Randy Barnett. But anyway, he brought in the Ninth Amendment. And the Ninth Amendment, of course, says that just because something's not stated as a right doesn't mean it isn't. This list of this Bill of Rights is by no means exhausted, right? Exhausting, rather. So if you think about the presumption of liberty, my natural state is free, right? I can walk around, I can move around, I can think my own thoughts, I can speak. Now, if somebody wants to tell me they have the right to stop me from doing this, they have to have the argument, not me.
Amen to that. Robert Naser, thank you very much for that $2 super chat. And you're right, interruptions are okay due to super chats. That's not rude. We did get on that one a little late because it was perfectly timed when he sent it, Michael. But now we're on to a different topic because we didn't call it out.
Are you insulting my facilitating the chat skills?
No, I'm just saying it like it is, man. Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. We've gone from a system where the politicians are supposed to be our servants to now the politicians are our overlord. The politicians as servants model is that, we have the presumption of liberty. And if they think that something needs to be done that violates that presumption, they have to prove why it is so. Now that's not the case. There are overlords who know better than us. They're the Platonic philosopher kings who know better how to manage society than we do. And so they are going to impose their will upon us. Our point of view be damned. Or
Megan wants to see the insect.
I knew she would.
Megan, I need to know what the hell we're going to talk about on Saturday. Let's start there.
So I wish this were the case, Michael. Now the question,
do you want me to get the bug? Should I go get the insect?
Yeah, the question for sure, if it won't take too long.
A couple minutes.
Yeah, the question for me, guys, and I'll ask you folks in the comment section: how do we get back to the concept of government officials being our servants and not our overlords? How do we impress upon the political class that they are the worst, most rapacious class in history? It's not the upper class versus the lower class. It's not the capitalists and the bourgeois versus the proletariat. It's always been us versus the political class. And America came up with a fantastic way of restraining them, this amazing document called the Constitution, which has been thrown out basically decades ago. So how do we do it, man? How do we do it? Because the American people were complicit in throwing out the Constitution. They have been a party to this growing debacle of statism. So what do we do? I'd love suggestions from folks in the gallery because we're going to have to talk about a lot of this stuff in our national convention. We have a massive uphill battle to fight with respect to the way the culture is moving. And any suggestions from you guys, from the big brains out there in the audience, would be much appreciated. I love the concept of the presumption of liberty, and we have to go back to that. This is why I hate the word class as a demographic classifier. It has the connotation of the Marxist hierarchy. That's true, but it could also be a categorization, right? The political class is it's a categorization of people who aspire to political office and then aspire to use that office to assert their conception of right on the rest of us. That's what the political class seems to be doing now. And that's more in line with the history of what they have always done. America was a nice break away from that typical orientation of the political class versus the people. As long as it doesn't involve digging through trash. What is this? Revolution. The science has spoken. Release the insect. Yes. Okay. We're going to see it wherever this insect is. I think he has to go outside. He's gone outside now to find it. How you vote, support liberty-minded candidates. That's all well and good, Kathy, but where are the liberty-minded candidates? As we're going to discuss later on in this program, there has been a split of the Republican Party used to sort of stand for liberty. They used to sort of represent, even unconsciously, classical liberal principles, but they don't do that anymore. They've been infected by a nationalist strain. There's a theocratic elements to it. There's certainly no more. It's gone. There's certainly no more elements to the Republican Party that want to conserve classical liberalism. So if you could find somebody on a ticket who actually holds even a fraction of those views, do let me know, especially on the East Coast where you live. Can you tell us a little about the convention? Yes, we're going to.
Yeah. I couldn't find the bug. I dug through the trash and I got sick of it.
It's Michael. It probably reanimated and it's flying around outside. Yeah, the convention is going to be on the 19th to the 20th. It's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Why did we choose Pittsburgh, Michael? Was it sort of seemed like a halfway point for some people who lived in the South and on the East Coast.
I didn't choose it. I had no say. I was just.
I think it seemed like a halfway point for some of the people on the board, and I thought, I would be the one to have to travel the furthest. Everyone else just has a little hop, skip, and jump over there. Yeah, and we're going to be discussing. We're going to have speakers there. Larry Sharp, Jonathan Hoenig is going to be speaking. Michael's going to be speaking. Michael's friend Carlos, who's both these guys, self-made men, they're going to be speaking. And we're going to have discussions with respect to policy, how to deal with Social Security, phase out to privatization, probably medical care, reforming PACs and the dark money in PACs. Those are going to be some of the policies we're going to be talking about. We want to be able to, we want to vote on them, vote on delegates, and we want to start expanding the party to other states, which is not easy, folks. You need people with not only connections, but with the know-how, the technical know-how to establish the structure of a party. Luckily, we have Ariana Sneef who does that. That's her thing. She was able to establish our party, and now she's working on canvassing and working with politicians who are sort of out. They're within traditional political parties, but they're certainly outside of what's going on now. Abundance Democrats, for example, socially liberal Democrats who are fiscally conservative, and any Republicans who want to break away from the MAGA chain and go back to conserving classical liberalism. We're trying to caucus with some of these folks and build some bridges. She's better at that than Michael and I. We're the straight principles folks. So we bring the principles. She brings the ability to caucus with these folks. So that's what it's going to be. We might have panels. We might be discussing concepts, but for the most part, it's going to be about straightening out our policies, voting on those policies, and then presenting those to states.
How long is my speech? How long do I have to talk?
I don't know.
What do you mean?
You're the vice chair. You can talk as long as you want.
Well, we're going to get kicked out eventually. I can't just talk as long as I want.
Well, that's true. I mean, when I said as long as you want, I assumed a sort of rational standard of 30 minutes.
Okay, well, let me tell you. This I haven't written a word of it yet. Not one word. I guarantee you this is going to be a great speech. It'll be the best talk I've ever given anywhere.
Might even be the best talk of the convention. Although
Oh no, it will be.
Honig's awesome.
Honig
Larry
is
Sharp is pretty amazing.
That's true.
So let's get back to the presumption of liberty, folks, instead of the presumption of permission. You don't need permission from a bureaucrat to do anything, not in a free society, not in a capitalist society, certainly. So we have to get back to the presumption of liberty, and then put our politicians on the chopping block. And when they don't seek our permission to do stuff, get them out. Get them out.
Hey, when I was a kid, teenager, and we'd be at the girls' windows talking to them or whatever. One time this happened, and this has happened. I've heard about this a few times. This is why I'm asking you. The stepdad came outside in his tighty whities. Was that like a thing with these guys like 30 or 40 years ago? Did they all rock the tighty whities in the bedroom? And then if there was, a burglar or something, they came running out in the tighty whities?
I guess. Yeah. Yeah, that was a thing.
That
was certainly a
weird,
thing.
Man.
So, Michael, you sent me some stuff about the end of conservatism. What?
Ian Gilmore has a question.
Go ahead. Read it out.
He wants to know, is the American Capitalist Party anti-gerrymandering?
No, I think gerrymandering in the way that they do it now, which has nothing to do with censuses and has nothing to do with actually representing the population at large. I mean, now they just do it in order to gain seats. But a reapportioning according to census data, I think that's appropriate. You need to have representatives that are appropriate to the number of people in their region. But gerrymandering in the sense of redistricting to get political advantages, I think that's bullshit. Yeah. So
it is, but it's like this thing where there was a big debate online about jury nullification, right? And it quickly became, okay, so what do you do then? If you're against jury nullification, great. What are you going to do to stop it? And here's the problem, and I think it's the same thing with a gerrymandering situation, is reapportioning has to take place. So the districts have to be decided somehow, right? I don't know of, and maybe somebody else out there does, an objective principle by which to assign districts.
Sort that stuff out, yeah.
Right? So you're inevitably going to have human beings deciding it.
Yeah, so gerrymandering in the way that Ian Gilmore is defining it is to me not correct. It's not proper. It's not based on objective standards. It's just an attempt of one party to gain leverage over the other. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, fight the duopoly, support third parties such as the American Capitalist Party. Look, I think we're the second party, to be honest with you. I think the statists in both the Democrats and the Republicans can have their own statist party, while we are the party of liberty for people. Gerrymandering should be opposed, but once the government has been defanged, gerrymandering will be irrelevant. Again, that's a great point, Robert. That's true.
That's a great point from Robert. That's why Robert needs to be at the convention. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things, Michael, are the pragmatic adjustments that officials are making because of corruptions already inherent in the statist system. So all they try to do is, based on the corruptions that are there, they're trying to leverage those corruptions to get more power so that they can have say over the corrupt system. Right. So you're right. Once you take the corruption out of it, once you release the state of its present obligations to interfere with our lives in every respect, then political power won't be that much. I remember Yaron Brook saying, I think it was Yaron Brook, talking about how little elections would matter in a rights-respecting country. I mean, they really wouldn't. If all a politician is there to do is to be the steward of your rights and property, just to be the night watchman who protects your life and property, then they wouldn't legislate a lot. There'd be very little of that. There would be no worry about anybody influencing them to put the finger on the scales of any business or any particular interest, because they wouldn't have the power to do that. They would be essentially defanged. there would be nothing for them to do and nothing for us to worry about. But now we have to be vigilant because every election does carry with it consequences for each and every one of us, right? Because we're going to be the one that are going to be forced to pay the bills that that they subject us to. We're going to have to pay for their idealism, their statist idealism.
I had something I wanted to say. Now I don't remember it, but it doesn't matter because Anna M has given us $2 and she's asking a question. Can the American Capitalist Party differentiate enough from libertarians? That's the question. Do you want me to take this?
Yeah. I'd love you to take it.
You want me to take it?
Yep.
Okay. The answer is an unequivocal yes, and I'm going to tell you why. First of all, our party, the principles are fundamentally rooted in reason and rational egoism as our ethical standard. Doesn't mean that everybody that joins the party has to be an objectivist or everybody even has to adhere to the same core ethic that the party is founded upon, but it does mean that the policy positions of the party are going to be rooted squarely here. That's one. Two, if you take an issue, for instance, like intellectual property, the Libertarian Party doesn't take a hard stance on it because, well, I'm not going to speculate why they don't, but they don't. And a lot of libertarians out there are very anti-intellectual property. We are 100% pro-IP. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no equivocation. Third, when it comes to national defense, we believe in a robust national defense, and contrary to popular belief, I am not some dove who thinks deterrent is irrelevant. The lesson that I've taken from libertarian theorists is that interventionism is often a bad idea, probably usually a bad idea. It doesn't mean, though, that war is always bad. That you can't, I mean, well, I shouldn't say it that way. That war is never necessary, because sometimes it is. I would argue that after 9/11, war was necessary. After Pearl Harbor, war was necessary. Sometimes it's necessary. And I also would support, and I think the party would too, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, if there was a real imminent threat against the United States, a preemptive strike. So we disagree with them starting founding principles. We disagree with some practical politics, as in IP, when it comes to national defense. And finally, there's no anarchists here. The American Capitalist Party is not brooking anarchism. We want a limited government restrained by the Constitution, not no government. There's no room in our party for anarchists.
Yeah, Michael, and I think you hate when I formulate it this way, but I do think the state can be a positive good in the same way that electricity is a good and fire is a good. It just has to be handled under very specific conditions.
And Mark Pellegrino is another one.
Right. It's a fantastic life affirming potential. It just has to be handled under certain conditions, where the anarchists think that inherently the state is corrupt. Inherently it's like the anti-gun folks who think guns in and of themselves have to be eliminated in order for there to be peace and a cessation of crime. No, we understand that values are what determine that stuff, right? It's the man wielding the gun. It's not the gun. And the government itself, it's the men in the government, it's the men and women animating the government, it's the principles behind the government that makes the government proper or improper. So, and that's so anarchists can't understand that evaluation, Michael. It's like literally impossible for them to digest that formulation. That's why they wouldn't enjoy being in our party, and why we can't really incorporate them into ours. And libertarianism is a big tent philosophy, which is to say that it's ambiguous. It's not clear enough, right, to exclude some of these rather insane fringe movements within their party.
So let me see here. Ann, I just hope, Ann M., I hope we answered your question. If not, if you want to elaborate or ask something more, that's cool.
So, Michael, we didn't talk about the end of conservatism, did we? We got off track. Did we? We didn't.
Are you serious? No.
No. I lost track. I got so involved. I wasn't sure.
It's like when you're acting and you become the boundaries between yourself and the character become blurred.
There are no boundaries between myself and the character. So there's a great article in the Daily Economy. We should post that, Michael, or more appropriately, you should post it.
I should, yeah.
And this is about where have all the conservatives gone? Left and right increasingly compete over how to wield government power rather than whether to limit it. I mean, this almost, Michael, if you read this article, it's almost my speech that I'm going to be giving at the convention. It's very, very close to my speech. Stephanie Slade's Fusionism asks whether liberty and restraint still have a constituency. What do you think of this, Michael? Yeah, because at one time, conservatism had maybe intuitively, not so explicitly, they were the conservators of classical liberalism. They essentially wanted a small government, not intrusive. They more or less went along with free markets. They understood that a population in a republic could only keep a republic by being moral. So they advocated a religious perspective. But they more or less wanted the government to stay out of the individual's way. And now the conservatives, such as they are, the right, such as it is, Republicans, have completely abandoned that conception of conservatism.
Sure.
What say you?
So what I'm going to say may sound contradictory at first, but allow me to proceed. In the 60s, Ayn Rand wrote an essay called Conservatism, an Obituary. She rightly pointed out the God, family, country, swamp. She rightly pointed out that capitalism was in.
Go ahead.
So, anyways, okay. Well, you say that, but you had this echo coming through. Okay, so it was inconsistent. Capitalism and religion, for instance, are not consistent with one another. The right wing's obsession with, 10 commandments in school, that sort of thing, are not consistent with free market capitalism. So what they call this sort of fusionism, a lot of it is just bad eclectics, right? It's a bad mix of things. That said, there were good elements within that eclectic mix. There were strong national defense called for by the likes of Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan. There was constitutional restraint, constitutional government, originalism, which is a good thing, and generally pro-market rhetoric, which was good as well. And, the following of some of the good sort of liberty-minded economists, Mises, Hayek, Milton Friedman. But ultimately, the bad has drowned out what was good in that. And what we have now is just populist grievance garbage, really. So I wanted to know, so I posed this question to Claude. I said, compare and contrast the views and styles of Barry Goldwater, William F. Buckley Jr., Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump. So when it comes to Barry Goldwater, it said he was the intellectual architect of modern American conservatism. His 1964 book, The Conscience of a Conservative, laid out a fusion of limited government economics, states' rights, and hawkish anti-communism. Stylistically, he was blunt, sometimes to a fault. He was a purist, not a coalition builder. William F. Buckley Jr. was the movement's gatekeeper and stylist rather than a politician. Through National Review, he worked to fuse libertarians, traditionalists, and anti-communists into one coherent fusionist conservatism while also policing the movement's boundaries. This is important right here. So most notably, he expelled the John Birch Society and anti-Semitic and isolationist elements from respectable conservatism. So those elements were already there, the J.D. Vance types, the Jack Posobiec types, but Buckley gatekept them. Third, Ronald Reagan took Goldwater's ideology and made it electorally successful by softening its edges, optimistic rather than combative. He combined tax cuts, deregulation, and anti-communism with a sunny, folksy communication style shaped by his acting background. Then we get to Donald Trump. Donald Trump breaks from all three in both substance and style. Ideologically, he's populist and nationalist rather than fusionist conservative. He's skeptical of free trade, more restrictionist on immigration, less committed to entitlement cuts or free market orthodoxy, and less consistently hawkish abroad. Stylistically, he's the invert of Buckley's cerebral gatekeeping, communicating through blunt assertion and grievance rather than argument or wit, and prizing loyalty and personal branding over institutional or intellectual coherence. And I just wonder if, now human beings have free will, so take what I say about inevitable with a grain of salt, but if you look back and you try to put together this eclectic bunch of, you know, the Rothbardian libertarians with your Christian moralists and your free marketeers and constitutionalists, and you don't really have a ideological sort of core that holds it all together, maybe this was the inevitable result. Maybe it was, you know, inevitably going to end with Donald Trump.
I think so, man. Didn't Bill Buckley say something like when he defined conservatism, it's standing astride history and saying no, something like that?
I think it was saying stop.
Saying stop. That's it. To me, so. To me, all that says, Michael, philosophically, is that the only job of the conservative is to stop progress, to stop progressive, progress. It says nothing about what American conservatism should uniquely be. Which look, you know, back in the days of the French National Assembly that defined these terms left and right, the right were the traditional monarchists. Well, if we translate those terms for Americans, Americans' traditional take on government was classical liberalism. It was representative republicanism, and that's what the conservatives should have been standing astride and saying no to the encroachment of the state and yes to the progress of human liberty, to the progress of human industry, to the progress of human life.
Did I ever tell you about William Buckley, what he said to me?
You had a discussion with him?
I exchanged letters with him, yeah.
What did he say to you?
So I wrote him this letter after 9/11, and let me just give you a little bit of context. At this time, there was a big Republican outreach to minorities, to blacks, Hispanics, etc. And Jews, of course, historically are Democrats. So I wrote to Buckley and I said, why not reach out to Jews who actually share your values? You know, the Democrats are anti-Israel, for instance. They embrace anti-Semites like Sharpton and Farrakhan. Why not reach out to Jews? And so he writes me back, and this is, I've never been disagreed with this nicely, ever. He says, Dear Michael, it is with profound reluctance that I disagree with your most appealing line of reasoning. Now, here's the thing. Can you imagine Trump ever talking to somebody like that?
No. We've fallen.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, so Ayn Rand was right when she wrote Conservative and Obituary. Friedrich Hayek also wrote Why I'm Not a Conservative, which is a very good essay. And this is what we have now. What now qualifies for the right are just, it's just garbage, pure garbage.
Yeah, it doesn't resemble any of the what I would consider foundational American principles that I would define as Americanism, Michael. And what's so crazy about it is they consider themselves to be American patriots. It's like the American Communist Party. Remember about a year ago, they were trying to co-opt conservatism. They're trying to capture conservative voters by claiming that they're patriotic.
Yeah, and I would say they were MAGA communists.
They were MAGA communists. And I would say, no, communism and Americanism can't exist in the same place, babe. You can't be a patriot for Americanism. You can't be loyal to the concept of Americanism and call yourself a communist. I mean, these people, you talk about words, Michael. You and James are going to talk about words, and I know how important words and formulations are to you. Imagine getting away with that one. And they are getting away with it a little bit. I mean, they're not that influential, but they are getting away with that shit.
It's interesting because when I was talking to Jim this morning, And I talked to him about communists. If you ever have a debate or a discussion with a communist, they use words in a way that nobody else does, which makes the discussion very, very difficult because it's really wacky. I don't know how else to describe it. But it's a very wacky thing. And yes, words are vital, and I hope everybody checks this out. Once Jim and I, this is going to be an interesting discussion between Jim and I, because I'm not going into this discussion. Normally, I do a ton of research before an interview, a debate, this show, whatever. This, I'm not, because I'm going into this episode with the idea of sharing what I already think, but open to learning about the topic. So not that I'm always open to learning, of course, but this time it's far more of I don't have a hard view that I'm ready to put forward. And so I'm ready to learn, because even a brief conversation I had with Jim the other day about the topic, he was teaching me, to the point where I kind of have to tell him, all right, Jim, you got to stop because we need to save something for the show.
Yeah, Michael, just to go back to this point, when I saw the picture of Candace Owens and Andrew Wilson and the advertisement for their debate, I thought to myself, just looking at that picture, this is everything that's wrong with America right now.
It is. But there was one funny moment. I didn't watch the whole debate, but I've seen clips. There was a moment that I thought was absolutely awesome. So they're arguing about the dumbest shit. She claims there's this big conspiracy behind the Charlie Kirk assassination. He claims there's not. So anyway, she says, you say you're following this case. Do you even know what Tyler Robinson is charged with? He says, well, I know murder. She says, actually, no, he's not charged with murder. You're wrong. He says, well, do you know all 7 counts? And she says, yeah, I do. He said, okay, let's hear him. So the first one she says is aggravated murder. He said, okay, so murder. So she says, no, actually, no, aggravated murder is not murder. And she's right. They're a different charge. So you're using legal concepts here as far as what somebody is charged with. And charging somebody with aggravated murder is not the same thing as charging them with murder, any more than first-degree murder is second-degree murder or second-degree murder is manslaughter. So he tries his badgering thing, where he says, okay, let's hear the rest. Do you know the rest, or are you just trying to buy? And she's like, look, you can try to rush me all you want, but I'm going to say what I need to say, and I'm going to name them. And so while he was taunting her that she couldn't name all 7, she named all 7.
So Candace Owens, the conspiracy theorist extraordinaire, the anti-Semite, like the vicious anti-Semite, beat Andrew Wilson, the paleo conservative, in the debate?
Well, to be fair, I submitted the transcript of the debate to AI, and AI said he won. That he won on points. But the point is he just pulled his dickhead routine of trying to badger the woman. And I don't have any sympathy for her. It is the battle of idiots, like Jim says, but it was just so funny that he called her out and she just rattled off 7 charges. So,
Michael, we're running low on time, so I wanted to get to the healthcare thing because
aren't we all?
Indeed. I wanted to get to the healthcare stuff because we hear a lot about that. It's now becoming, I guess Harry Truman was one of the first politicians to propose that single-payer healthcare, and it goes out of fashion and then comes back into fashion. But now, Michael, we hear it all the time, with the additional hubbub that every civilized country and every rich country on the planet has this kind of healthcare. Why don't you? That's never been a persuasive argument to me, Michael, but it's as persuasive as, hey, 1 billion people believe in Christianity. It must be right. It's not persuasive, but it's pushing the argument in that direction. Of course, over the years, from 1968 on, we've been slowly socializing healthcare to the point where a massive proportion of our at least half of all healthcare and all healthcare. Half healthcare, I think, comes directly from the government, and all healthcare is managed by the government or somehow regulated and controlled by the government, to the point where 51 cents of every dollar is spent by government on healthcare. So it's a terrible market with terrible market distortions. but we do have examples, Michael, of what happens in a single payer system. We have it directly north of our border in Canada, where they have 10% of our population and a whole host of issues with respect to accessibility for the people who pay into this system. A system, Michael, which I've paid exponentially more into than almost anybody who benefits from it. And I didn't see any of my Canadian dollars go for my health and well-being. But please, let's talk about this a little bit, like some of the problems that exist with single payer care.
Okay. So first of all, I just want to make some differentiation. So whenever this discussion comes up, there seems to be a tendency for people to, when they're arguing about comparing America to other countries, they seem to put America in the bag of it's a free capitalist pure competition model, and then compare it to other countries that aren't, right? But America, like you just said, is not that. Also, so what they're proposing in America is Medicare for all, which is actually going to be a lot costlier than what these other countries are like. And I was interested to know what countries currently have the closest system to what people are advocating when they say Medicare for all. The two closest were Canada and Taiwan, with Canada being far closer to what the people say are, what they advocate for, Medicare for all. So I asked a few questions. I wanted some ratings as far as health outcomes, life expectancy, access, wait times, and public satisfaction, citizen satisfaction with the system. And actually, Taiwan, the people tend to like it. Doctors and stuff, not so much. They tend to complain about it. But generally speaking, people like it in Taiwan. Now, we've got like 5 minutes. We can't get into the entire Taiwanese system. But Canada is the one that's closest. So let me just explain. Let me just say what this says here. So Canada's system is much closer to what Americans typically imagine when they hear Medicare for all. The provinces essentially provide publicly financed insurance for medically necessary hospital and physician services. Canada has a major problem. You generally don't pay much money, but you may pay with your time. This is the single biggest weakness of Canadian healthcare. The Fraser Institute found a 30-week median wait from GP referral through specialist consultation to treatment for elective care. That's an extraordinary long time, and it's not an ideological talking point. Waits can become particularly long for orthopedic surgery, joint replacements, diagnostic imaging, specialist consultations, or elective surgery. The median wait was 16 weeks for an MRI and 8 weeks for CT scans. Now, nobody is financially ruined in Canada. Canada does have a longer life expectancy than the United States, but that said, they also have different health habits and things of that nature. So you can't really rely on that. But when it comes to satisfaction, so in Taiwan, they're very satisfied. In Canada, it's mixed, but it's deteriorating. And in America, we're very dissatisfied.
Michael,
but again, I want to say this, though. Hold on. Don't go sick. Just hold on. It's very important. Yes, socialized healthcare is bad. America is not. America is not a free market in healthcare. It's just not. So if we're going to argue, because as I was reading the Reason, or was it a Reason article? I don't remember. I think it was
Reason.
I was thinking, okay, you're beating up on the Medicare for all style countries, but what about the United States, which they don't mention? Which the United States tends to be more expensive. What if you can afford it? United States has phenomenal healthcare, but a lot of people can't afford it. But we have to recognize that the United States is not free market, not even close. So when we're criticizing the countries that have socialist healthcare, we have to be careful not to hold up the U.S. as the capitalist counterpart, because it's not. But fundamental to me in this debate is simple. People should be free. Remember, we talked about the presumption of liberty earlier.
Yeah.
People should be free. They should be free to earn their own money, to enter into their own contracts, and to keep their money. Nobody's health care, right, puts a demand on me or puts a claim on me that I have to pay for it, and vice versa. Right? So nobody should be taxed to pay for somebody else's health care. And also, people should be free to experiment, to show up to what doctor they want. There should not be 15 or whatever they are wait times for medications. And conservatives, by the way, now, the argument was always, the first time I ever came across it was Milton Friedman, but I've also heard Rush Limbaugh make it, that people argue that if medications, if the FDA doesn't exist, then, bad medications are going to get on the market. But they don't look at the other side of the ledger, that when medications aren't allowed to come forward, a lot of people die waiting for these. Conservatives or Republicans, whatever you want to call them, used to be fond of the argument that there should be far more leeway when it comes to innovation regarding medication. Then they became anti-vax. And then all of a sudden they started arguing that this vaccination came way too quick. The FDA approved it way too quick. So all of a sudden, a lot of them are fans of the FDA and regulation, et cetera, et cetera. But what we actually need is for people to actually be free to make their own decisions, take their own risks, keep their own money, and spend it how they please.
Yeah, Michael, I've been in these systems too, and I've seen firsthand, this is anecdotal, so take it as you choose, but I've seen firsthand how little time each physician has to spend with individuals because the system is overloaded. Even a system in Canada that has 10% of our population, Michael, general practitioners are overloaded. They can spend maybe 45 seconds to a minute with each person. When I went in to get my some physical stuff done for a show, I skipped the line. You should have seen the expressions on all the faces of the people who were waiting there. And each person got maybe 3 minutes of time from the physician. That was it. And he's harried. He's going from one person to the next. I sit down with my physician, Michael. I sit down for 3 hours with him, and he goes over my blood results bit by bit by bit. We talk about it. But my guy has opted out of the system. All of my doctors, Michael, have opted out of the system, and they take concierge medicine now because of the statist controlled insurance systems are so prohibitive and interfere with the relationship between the patient and the doctor. And we in a capitalist society say, no, you're the one who should make the decision about your life and your doctors and what kinds of treatment you need. In a socialized system, Michael, they actually submit your cause to a board of people who control this stuff, and they decide whether or not it's economically feasible for them to go ahead with treatment. And Michael, if you're 70, 80 years old and you have a treatment that's chronic and may cost a great deal of money, they do a palliative type of care and even an assisted suicide type of stuff in Canada because you're just too expensive for the system to maintain. Not to mention that thousands of people die every year waiting for treatments. As as fucked up as our system is because it's mostly socialized and completely controlled by the government. Price systems are derailed. They can't operate because the government's constantly interfering with them. We don't have what they have, say, in the NHS, where all of the cancers that are preventable and have pretty good outcomes here in the United States, from prostate cancer to lung cancer and breast cancer. Those are killers in some of these socialized countries because you have to wait for weeks upon weeks upon weeks just for a frickin' PET scan. And Michael, I don't want my life to be subjected to a panel who decides whether or not I am worth it. Whether I'm worth the expenditure, then my life is determined by their numbers and not by my own desire to live. So, look, man, we gotta bring medicine back to the idea of an open free market. Here in the United States, insurance companies can't compete between state lines, so there's monopolies in states. Of course, that drives up prices. There's lots of ways to deal with this, Michael, but it seems like the establishment is heading towards a one-payer system, and the people are pushing.
I hate that word.
I agree. I hate it too.
I hate the word establishment. I hate it. I don't like the use of it.
Well, but it's true. They are the establishment.
Nah. I just think it becomes not you're doing it, but a lot of people, it just becomes a sloppy critique. Oh, the establishment's this and the establishment that. Either way, the establishment of the YouTube question yesterday, Mark asked the question whether the Republicans would win the House. It was not a very popular question, evidently, because only Greg Doherty answered it. He said Republicans win the House at midterms. I don't know, but lean towards hoping the House changes hands. Split party control of government tends to be less destructive. I agree with that. All right, Mark. So now you do the capitalist thought of the day. I'll handle the question today.
Yeah, capitalism, folks, would operate under the presumption of liberty. So that would be the de facto moral orientation of the people to the government, that you have a right and are of right free. And the government has to make its case to you if it seeks to in some way infringe upon that liberty. So, I mean, for the Capitalist Party, 99.9% of what the government does now is a violation of your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and should be done away with. And a capitalist administration would work very hard at eliminating those obstacles to your happiness and life, because that's exactly what it is. We understand, though, we have a large proportion of the population now that are dependent upon the government, and so we'd have to do it rather slowly. To titrate people off the drug of the state.
Titrate?
I guess. Yeah. So to get them off the drug of the state, but our goal would be to make the state small, whose only purpose is the protection of property and the protection of your life. Everything else, folks, you're responsible for. I know it's daunting, but that's what a capitalist society is all about. Your life is your responsibility.
Great job. Titrate means to measure the concentration of a chemical solution in chemistry.
Don't jump the shark.
Or to gradually adjust a medical dose to find the safest and most effective level.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to give you, by analogy. If you're using an analogy or speaking metaphorically, maybe.
Exactly.
But, Mark Pellegrino, the wordsmith. Okay. He was using it metaphorically. Christopher Smith says that he's trying to rescue you, I guess. Maybe there's a man crush going on. I don't know. It's okay if there is. Okay. So shark jumped, and Megan uses the word all the time. Megan, I need to know what we're talking about Saturday. Please let me know. All right. What's the question? What the hell? What can I ask here today? I don't know. I don't really have one. This is tough. I usually can wing it. Okay. Megan comes in with serial solutions. What is the question? The question is this: if you could do any career that you wanted, in other words, you have to do some career, but whatever it's going to be, your expenses are all taken care of. So it's not a matter of money. It's just a matter of doing what you love. If you could do what you love, what would be your career?
All right, I'll take that, folks. So you got 23 hours now to check your premises. Remember, it's what all smart people do. We expect you to come back here tomorrow, primed and ready for action. It's going to be Q&A day, right? So
are you going to be here?
Bring your questions. So here's the deal. I'm working tonight. I think my call time is at like 4 in the afternoon, which means I'll probably be working till 4 in the freaking morning. What I'm going to try to do, Michael, is stay up. I'm going to try to stay up, do the reading that you send me, and stay up and do the show, despite the fact that I will be exhausted. Of course, that means that I'll have no rest going into tonight's shoot or tomorrow night's shoot. But I'm going to give it a shot. But if you don't see me here, it's because I couldn't wake up. Okay. And I hope it means like couldn't wake up, not as in dead. I just couldn't wake up for the show.
I need to address something. So Megan wants to know, should Mike put on his big boy panties and do fruit fly experiments? Megan wants to send me in the mail living fruit flies.
I love that.
That's
so hardcore.
No, I hate flies.
Yeah, but
and I said to her, are these living?
Sterile?
She said, yeah.
Are they sterile?
I don't know what they are, but I asked her, can you guarantee that they're not going to escape? She says, no. I don't want these damn flies zipping around. I hate when it's one. She's going to send me a bag.
And
No.
you're going to start an infestation over there in Connecticut.
Yeah, they're all going to love that. Either way, we'll see everybody tomorrow. What do you
Peace,
tell
guys.
them, Mark?
All right, man. Check your premises, babies.